Mr. Osei, good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Yeah, it's a gonna mind of yeah.
And Pope is pay.
Me who here? Some here.
And your cry, Minia, your team. Maybe so. The cause for the sacking of the finance minister, appropriate or inappropriate?
Okay, these calls have been coming. It didn't start today. You look at the trajectory. It started a couple of months ago. And to me, I don't think that's what we need right now. I think what we need right now is to put together very, very robust measures to deal with that. And Abusa will say, some economic problems, you blame me, finance minister. Can you blame him for that? Let me tell you for a fact. Say, this problem we are going to, do you know why we are going through that? Now, because of excessive borrowing, now we borrowed over the past. It's even go international market and go borrow money. Can you go international market? This problem will not be there. Can we borrow money to what? Stabilize the currency. Now, do you know why we cannot go and borrow money? Over the period, the budget and Namado government, it take it to parliament. If we are 90 billion, 120, 80 billion, Mama not the same echo, 50, 60. Where did this budget come from? Excessive expenditure by this government, over Namado government, ministries do what critique a bit so any expenditures on some of these expenditures incurred on some of these flagship programs. And in the manema when introducing also be over financial sector cleanup, any take or pay payments, interest payment for over financial sector cleanup, any even take or pay. You spend over 40 billion. Which I want to say as a lawyer, may just spend put it down as a lawyer, as a president. A better facilitating, say basically in the back. It is this problem they want because of excessive debt borrowing. What did it emanated from some of these and those policies and some of the things it forced them to put them in the budget. Right? Even today, that thing some are still in the budget. I mean, so ministries you are by now, without say, and come on year for budget. Can operator doesn't have the authority to take things, close those ministers. It doesn't have the power. Ministry of this, Aviation, Ministry of Transport, Ministry of Railway, Ministry of this, Ministry of Communication, Information, there were aquaculture, there were chieftaincy, there were chieftaincy, tourism, lands, environment, flagship program, and there were revising some of these programs, reduce expenditures. Over some of these, 183 state-owned corporations. Every year, Moboka, every year, operations restructuring to deal with this fiscal and debt vulnerability. Meaning another Ofori Atta cannot do that. It cannot collapse ministry. Do you understand? So someone blaming now. I say he has to be blamed back. Namado is one of these men we have to think about. What's what I'm making us say? So this debt country now bought so much of buy some of these debts is this Namado. Here some of these debts are there. And also see the international market and go borrow money and they stabilize the currency. So the root cause of the problem is that it's our excessive debts, international market and go borrow money to stabilize the currency. And can you blame him so much for those things? Can you blame Ofori Atta that it's his responsibility to close some ministries and it's not his responsibility, it's the responsibility of the president.
Now, Bismark.
Yeah.
Hold on 1 second with your submission. In the preparation of the budget, all these expenditures, let's work with your argument too. It is not he who creates ministries and it's not him who has put the fiscal and the government's flagship programs in the budget and all of that. But the people of Ghana know him with all that heavy burden that the president has put on his shoulder to ensure that there's macroeconomic stability regardless. So, if the president says, I want this done, I want that done, then it becomes his responsibility to ensure that he manages all these within the space that he has. Not so.
Of course, it's his responsibility. I want this done, I want this done. But what you're saying should be feasible, very productive, not just putting things that are not productive in the budget. Right? I want these things to be done. I want this to be done.
So for instance, financial sector cleanup that you mentioned, I remember at the time the arguments that was put forth, and I was one of those who said that's the way forward, that we should not use over $25 million to close banks when we can use less to keep them afloat and keep people's jobs, and these individuals would have been paying taxes. Was that the decision of the finance minister or the president?
That financial sector cleanup, 25 billion cities, And one of they were no option. That was the option they were supposed to take over asset quality review report of these banks. Make sure most of these banks they were insolvent. Asset quality review report from Mahama time. So some of these banks were very, very in a very deleterious state. You and I, about 4 million Ghanaians, money would have been lost. So what they did was a very palliative measure to deal with the problem. There was no problem with what they did. The problem is they are not able to retrieve the money they spent. That's the problem.
Let me put this one to you. You remember around that same time there were some 5 or so banks that they created the amalgamated trust for them. You remember?
Yeah,
to keep them afloat.
GAT, Amalgamated Trust Bank.
Yes.
Yeah, GAT.
So when they created an amalgamated trust, this was to keep some banks which are now still working and operating with their staff. The argument is that if you were able to create the amalgamated trust for these banks, could we not have done the same for the other banks to keep them afloat? And then over a period, new managers take over these banks. Because if you spend all that huge sums of money, and it's been one of the recurring expenditures which has been on our books, was that President Akufo-Addo or the decision of the finance minister?
People look at the GAT you're talking about. Some of the banks they saw they were publicly owned and they saw that they needed some small amount of money to meet the capital requirement, right? You remember the recapitalization. They saw that they were public banks and they would need small amount of money to add to what was demanded. And therefore the GAT was to help raise money to support these banks. And some of these were public banks. So the idea was that these are public and they need some amount of cushion. And that's different from a private company banks being run, right? Some of these companies, let me tell you, over some of the line, I don't want to mention some of the banks. Lines is higher, last any scout, money finance, and they be cry a money laundering. How can we sustain such a bank that use money laundering to start, right? But the problem is that they are not able to put down measures to retrieve the money they spend. Why? What I'm saying, some of them are in court. It's true they're in court, but the process is very slow, right? Can't we set up a different tribunal to speed up the process? The president is a lawyer, right? People who cause this problem are still in the country.
Interesting points you make. But the same individual who sought to clean up the banking sector, you remember recently the Fitch downgrade of some banks in the country. Isn't it the same person who is supervising? What's the link between that and His Excellency the President? You remember what the Fitch report said about these banks? They said that it was as a result of their exposure to government guarantees and bonds one more issue.
Yes, that one, that Fitch rating that came, they're talking about these banks that bought so much of government excessive liquidity, right? And that didn't have anything to do with the cleanup. You said over the period 2002, 2001, most of these banks, government raised most of their loans internally. And these banks have bought so much of government liquidity, securities, right? And so the Fitch thought that some of these banks will be very vulnerable to any shocks if it can because of the excessive government things they are bought, and that's what fixed it. And it had nothing to do with this financial sector cleanup.
The point I'm making is the strength of these banks, which at the moment is hinged on the Ghanaian economy or the Ghanaian government's performance in its ability to meet these requirements to these banks. That's what has caused these banks, not necessarily because these banks are underperforming. Do you get the drift I'm making?
I'm trying to get your argument. I'm not getting your argument.
The argument I'm making is this. You are talking about you want to virtually absolve the finance minister from this matter and then replace it on the head of His Excellency the President. Fair enough.
I'm not absolving him totally. But I'm not absolving him totally from the equation. He has a responsibility to play. I'm not absolving him. It's a responsibility to bring down measures to stabilize what they're going through. Fine. That one, I will not absolve him, but people are also trying to push some people out of the picture. That they have not brought those people into the picture. I'm trying to say, yes, he has to be blamed. He's the finance minister, but there are some people who have to be brought into the picture. Well, even Tor, as I said, the energy minister, what have the energy minister have done to make sure Tor become very effective? Let me tell you, this year, Tor told us that June, there are 2 plants that got spoiled. The crude distillation unit and the 2 plants is coming back June. And when they come, it can process 40,000 barrels of oil. Then we don't need to even import. But has this come back? What's the job of the energy minister? Has he questioned them? Who has questioned them that the toll should be operationally efficient? These things have not been done. So look at the trade minister. Let me tell you, the last 2 months, the Poultry Association came to tell us that they gave $600 million contract to people to go and import poultry products. Whilst people can do that job in the country. What have been the responsibility of the trade minister? These are people, you have let them out of the question. It's true, you have to take some of them. Why? It's very rebarbated. Very rebarbated. You cannot, the finance minister has to play. But it's a broader picture than only the finance minister. Baumia is there. Look at this, look at the Japan deal. What was Samafo did? That the Japan deal, we couldn't get that amount of money to finance infrastructure. All this even the economic management team, they have to be playing. But nobody's talking about the economic management team. Of course, so we have to look at it from a very broad perspective. People have played a very precipitating role in this development. We have to look at it from a very broad perspective. And I don't think now there's no need for even, this is not a time to be bringing people. It's a time to sit down and look for palliative measures to deal with it. I don't think it's necessary. This person should be sacked. This person should be sacked. I don't think it's what we need right now. Let's sit down. Let's bring ideas together to fix the problem. That's what is important.
Bismark, I thank you for joining me this morning